The number blinking on the screen was killing a billion-dollar company in real time. Rain hammered against the glass walls of Hayes Global Tower while panic spread across the 42nd floor like smoke. Red numbers flashed across every monitor inside the executive boardroom. Loss projected, $872,441,903. Traders shouted into phones. Legal advisors whispered about federal investigations. Someone near the back of the room actually muttered the word bankruptcy out loud, and the silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Alexander Hayes stood at the head of the 12-foot conference table, one hand pressed against the cold glass wall overlooking Manhattan. At 38 years old, he had built Hayes Global into one of the largest investment technology firms in America. But tonight his billion-dollar empire looked fragile enough to collapse before sunrise. "Tell me this is a system error," Alexander said quietly. No one answered. Vanessa Blake, the company's interim CFO, adjusted the sleeve of her cream-colored designer blazer and cleared her throat carefully. "We've checked the numbers 3 times," she said. "The discrepancy is real." Across the room, accountants avoided eye contact. One junior analyst looked seconds away from throwing up. The stock market would open in less than 9 hours. If those financial statements leaked before then, Hayes Global would lose everything. Outside the boardroom, hidden beneath the gold lights of the luxury lobby, Emily Carter sat curled on a leather bench near the elevators. Her damp coat clung to her shoulders. One hand rested protectively over her 8-month pregnant belly while the other wrapped around a paper cup of free hot water she'd gotten from the lobby cafe downstairs. She looked invisible. The kind of woman wealthy people passed every day without seeing. Her blonde hair was messy from the rain. Her sneakers were worn thin at the soles. The security guard near the revolving doors had already asked her twice if she was waiting for someone. Emily had simply nodded and looked back down at the television mounted above the reception desk. Financial headlines rolled across the screen. Hayes Global faces possible collapse. Market experts predict disaster. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. Then she saw the number. $872,441,903. Her expression changed instantly. Not fear. Recognition. "That number is impossible," she whispered. Nearby, a young intern carrying printed balance sheets hurried past her toward the elevators. One page slipped loose from the stack and landed near Emily's feet. The intern didn't notice. Emily stared at the report for 3 seconds. 4. Then she slowly bent down despite the pressure in her back and picked it up. Her breathing became shallow. Numbers moved across the page like old memories waking up. Deferred liabilities. Acquisition entries. Duplicate reporting loops. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup. "No," she murmured. "You counted the Singapore liabilities twice." Upstairs, another executive slammed his fist against the conference table. "We are running out of time." Down in the lobby, Emily reached for a red pen sitting beside the receptionist's desk. Calmly, almost absent-mindedly, she circled one line on the balance sheet and corrected the equation in the margin. The intern returned seconds later and froze. "Hey!" he snapped. "What are you doing?" Emily looked up slowly. "Saving your company," she said softly. And at that exact moment, 42 floors above her, Alexander Hayes heard someone scream from inside the accounting department. "Wait, the numbers are changing." For 3 full seconds, nobody inside the Hayes Global boardroom moved. The giant financial screen flickered once, then the projected loss dropped by almost $400 million. One accountant blinked hard and adjusted his glasses as if his own eyes had become unreliable. Another frantically refreshed the system again and again. The corrected balance sheet stayed exactly the same. "That is impossible," someone whispered near the back of the room. Vanessa Blake stepped closer to the monitor, her polished nails tightening around a silver tablet. "Who changed the acquisition entries?" she demanded sharply. No one answered. Across the table, Alexander Hayes slowly straightened from the glass wall. He had spent the last 6 hours watching some of the best Financial minds in New York failed to stop the collapse of his company. Yet somehow, in less than 60 seconds, the numbers had shifted. Not completely fixed, but stabilized enough to stop immediate disaster. And that terrified him even more. "Trace the correction," Alexander ordered quietly. A young analyst swallowed hard. "It came from the lobby printer queue." Silence again. Then confusion exploded all at once. "The lobby? Who even has access down there? Was this internal?" Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. "Security breach," she snapped. "Lock the elevators." Downstairs, Emily Carter slowly handed the marked-up balance sheet back to the nervous intern. The young man stared at the red correction like it was written in another language. "You changed the deferred liability structure," he said carefully. Emily nodded once. "Because it was counted twice after the Singapore acquisition rollover." "How did you even know that?" Emily lifted the paper cup toward her lips, but it was empty now. "Because whoever built your reporting system buried the debt inside the tax offset category." The intern frowned. "That should not even be visible on this version." Emily gave a tired little smile. "Exactly." Before he could respond, 2 security guards appeared beside the reception desk. Their dark uniforms reflected sharply against the marble floor. "Miss," one of them said firmly, "we need you to leave the building." The intern hesitated. "Actually, I think she just helped us, now," the guard interrupted. Emily lowered her eyes. She looked exhausted suddenly. More exhausted than before. Like the adrenaline keeping her upright had finally started fading away. Slowly, she pushed herself off the leather bench while one hand supported the weight of her stomach. Rainwater still dripped from the edge of her coat onto the polished marble floor. Some people in the lobby glanced at her with annoyance. Others pretended not to notice her at all. A pregnant homeless woman did not belong inside a billion-dollar skyscraper. Everyone could feel it. Everyone except Alexander Hayes. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the billionaire CEO stepped into the lobby. Surrounded by executives and legal advisors. Conversations instantly died around him. Emily did not look up at first. She was focused on adjusting the worn strap of her bag against her shoulder. But Alexander was already staring at the red pen marks on the balance sheet in the intern's trembling hands. "Who wrote that correction?" he asked. The guard pointed immediately. "Her, sir. We were just removing her from the property." Emily finally lifted her eyes toward Alexander. Calm blue eyes. Tired but steady. Not intimidated. Not impressed either. Alexander noticed something strange then. She did not look at him the way people usually did. No nervousness. No excitement. No greed. Just recognition. Like she already understood exactly who he was and had decided it did not matter. "Did you fix those numbers?" Alexander asked. Emily studied him for a moment before answering. "No," she said softly. "I only stopped the bleeding." And somewhere upstairs, another accountant suddenly shouted, "Wait! There is still 600 million missing." The lobby suddenly felt too small for the silence inside it. Every executive standing behind Alexander Hayes was staring at the pregnant woman near the reception desk like she had just spoken another language. $600 million was still missing from the company books, and somehow the only person who seemed calm about it was the woman wearing soaked sneakers and carrying everything she owned inside one faded gray backpack. Alexander took one slow step forward. "What do you mean the bleeding stopped?" Emily adjusted her grip on the paper cup before answering. "Your company is not collapsing because of one accounting error," she said quietly. "It is collapsing because someone designed the system to collapse slowly enough that nobody would notice until it was too late." Vanessa Blake folded her arms immediately. "That is absurd." Emily looked at her for less than a second. "No," she replied softly. "It is expensive." A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. Alexander noticed it instantly. Fear. Not confusion. Fear. Upstairs, another emergency alert flashed across the financial monitors. International transfer flagged. Review required. One of the analysts spoke through the speakerphone with panic in his voice. Sir, we found another hidden transaction tied to an offshore account. Vanessa turned sharply. Impossible. Emily finally looked directly at her. Cayman routing structure, she said. 3 shell companies layered under medical technology acquisitions. The room went dead silent again. The analyst on the speakerphone froze. How did she know that? Alexander did not answer. Because suddenly he wanted to know the exact same thing. Emily shifted slightly, one hand pressing against the small of her back as exhaustion crossed her face for just a moment. Then it disappeared again behind that strange calm expression. Alexander had negotiated billion-dollar deals with senators, hedge fund managers, and international investors. He knew what confidence looked like. But this felt different. This woman was not performing intelligence. She was simply speaking the truth faster than everyone else could process it. Vanessa gave a cold laugh. This is ridiculous. We are taking financial advice from a homeless stranger now. Emily lowered her eyes briefly. No, she said. You are hearing a warning from someone who has seen this exact fraud before. Alexander's expression changed instantly. Before? Emily did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the television screen above the lobby elevators where financial news anchors were already discussing whether Hayes Global would survive until morning. Red stock arrows flashed beside Alexander's own photograph. One headline read, Billionaire CEO faces corporate meltdown. Emily stared at it quietly. Whoever built your reporting structure hid the theft inside deferred acquisition liabilities, she finally said. The money was moved in pieces small enough to survive quarterly audits. One accountant near the elevators whispered, My God! Vanessa stepped closer. You are making accusations without evidence. Emily nodded slightly. Actually, I already found the evidence. That sentence changed everything. Alexander could feel it. The energy in the lobby shifted instantly. Even the security guards stopped moving. Rain continued, striking the glass windows high above Fifth Avenue, while somewhere deep inside the building, printers suddenly started spitting out updated financial reports one after another. Emily slowly held up the marked balance sheet toward Alexander. Red circles. Tiny notes written in perfect clean handwriting. Transaction chains. Numbers connected like puzzle pieces. Alexander stared at the page for several long seconds before looking back at her. Who are you? He asked quietly. Emily hesitated. For the first time since he met her, something uncertain flickered across her face. Not fear. Pain. Deep-old pain. Then the elevator doors behind Alexander opened suddenly, and Daniel Brooks rushed into the lobby holding a tablet in one shaking hand. Alex, he said breathlessly, you need to see this immediately. Alexander frowned. See what? Daniel swallowed hard. I ran facial recognition from old financial conference archives. He turned the tablet toward him. A photograph filled the screen. A younger Emily Carter standing on stage in Chicago wearing a Navy business suit, while hundreds of finance executives applauded around her. Underneath the photo was a headline that made Alexander Hayes stop breathing for one full second. The woman who predicted 3 corporate collapses vanished 6 years ago. The entire lobby seemed to tilt sideways after Alexander read the headline on Daniel Brooks's tablet. For years, people inside the financial world had whispered about Emily Carter like she was some kind of ghost story executives told each other behind closed doors. The woman who exposed corporate fraud before federal investigators even noticed it. The analyst who predicted 3 major collapses months before Wall Street crashed. Then suddenly, 6 years ago, she vanished without explanation. No interviews. No social media. No conferences. Nothing. And now she was standing barefoot inside a rain-soaked pair of sneakers in the middle of Alexander Hayes's lobby looking like she had not slept peacefully in months. Daniel lowered his voice carefully. She used to be one of the best forensic accountants in the country. Emily closed her eyes briefly when she heard that sentence. Not pride. Regret. Vanessa Blake crossed her arms tighter. If she was so brilliant, why is she sleeping in shelters? Emily looked directly at her this time. Calm. Steady. Because powerful people protect themselves first. Nobody answered that. Somewhere upstairs, another alert sounded from the accounting floor. More hidden transfers had been uncovered. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies disguised as technology licensing fees. Alexander barely noticed anymore. His attention stayed fixed on Emily. She looked exhausted under the bright lobby lights now. Pale. Her pregnancy obvious beneath the oversized coat. One hand pressed quietly against her stomach again, as though trying to steady herself from the inside. You disappeared after the Harrison financial scandal, Daniel said carefully. The reports said your testimony destroyed a $7 billion merger. Emily gave a faint, humorless smile. The reports forgot the important part. Alexander frowned slightly. Which was? Emily looked toward the rain sliding down the glass windows overlooking Manhattan traffic. The executives responsible kept their careers, she said softly. I lost everything. Silence spread through the lobby again. One of the younger analysts nearby slowly lowered his phone, completely forgetting he had been texting moments earlier. Emily continued before anyone could interrupt her. After I exposed the fraud, every company in the industry stopped returning my calls. Recruiters disappeared overnight. Friends stopped answering messages. She looked down at the faded strap of her backpack. People love the truth until the truth costs them money. Alexander felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest then. Not pity. Recognition. He had spent years inside rooms where billionaires protected billionaires no matter what laws were broken. Emily shifted slightly and winced almost invisibly. Daniel noticed immediately. You should sit down, he said gently. I am fine, Emily replied automatically. But her voice sounded thinner now. The adrenaline was fading fast. Vanessa glanced toward Alexander impatiently. Alex, with all respect, we do not have time for a tragic life story. The market opens in less than 8 hours. Emily looked toward her again. Then you should probably stop hiding the Cayman accounts. The sentence hit the lobby like ice water. Vanessa's expression changed for the first time that night. Tiny. Almost invisible. But Alexander saw it. Fear. Real fear. Emily noticed it too. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded stack of printed financial pages covered in handwritten notes. I started noticing the pattern 3 months ago, she said quietly. Your company was showing the same manipulation structure Harrison Financial used before it collapsed. Alexander stared at her. 3 months ago? Emily nodded once. I tried emailing your compliance department twice. Daniel immediately turned toward one of the assistants. Check that. The assistant hurried away. Emily's voice grew softer after that. Nobody responded. Rain hammered harder against the windows now while red brake lights reflected across the marble floor like blood-colored glass. Somewhere above them, Hayes Global was still bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars every hour. But Alexander Hayes suddenly realized something far worse than financial loss. Someone inside his company had ignored warnings from the one person in America capable of saving it. Then Daniel's phone buzzed sharply in his hand. He looked down at the screen, and the color drained from his face. Alex, he whispered carefully. Compliance did receive her emails. Alexander's jaw tightened. Who deleted them? Daniel looked slowly toward Vanessa Blake. Vanessa Blake did not panic immediately. That was what made Alexander Hayes notice her. Most people became louder when they were afraid. Vanessa became quieter. Colder. More precise. She slowly turned toward Daniel Brooks with a controlled smile that did not quite reach her eyes. You are accusing me because of deleted emails? She asked calmly. Daniel swallowed hard. The compliance logs show administrator-level removal access. Vanessa gave a soft laugh. Hundreds of people have administrative access. But Emily Carter was already shaking her head before the sentence even finished. No, she said quietly. Only one person. rerouted the audit notifications afterward. Vanessa's eyes flickered toward her. Tiny. Fast. But Alexander saw it again. Fear. Real fear. Emily reached for the stack of marked financial pages still resting against her side. Her fingers trembled slightly now from exhaustion, but her voice stayed steady. The fraud pattern inside Hayes Global was designed by someone who understood internal audit timing. She explained. Someone senior enough to delay investigations without triggering external review. Upstairs, another wave of emergency notifications lit up the accounting floor. More hidden accounts were surfacing by the minute now. One analyst hurried into the lobby looking pale. Sir, he said breathlessly toward Alexander. We found 23 unauthorized transfer chains connected to offshore subsidiaries. Vanessa answered before Alexander could speak. Then freeze the accounts immediately. Emily looked directly at her. You already moved the money. Silence. The young analyst blinked hard. What? Emily pointed toward one line inside the financial report. The Cayman transfers are a distraction. The real assets were moved through intellectual property licensing agreements 6 months ago. Alexander stepped closer to the page. How much? Emily hesitated for 1 second. Close to $1.4 billion. Someone behind Alexander actually whispered, Dear God. Vanessa's calm expression cracked slightly this time. This is insane. She snapped. You are listening to a homeless woman with no proof. Emily slowly lifted her eyes toward her. Actually, she said softly, I know exactly where the proof is. The lobby became completely silent again except for the rain striking the giant glass windows facing Manhattan. Even the elevators seemed quieter somehow. Emily turned toward Alexander carefully. Your internal server backup store deleted audit trails for 72 hours before permanent overwrite. Alexander frowned. How do you know that? Emily gave a tired smile that looked almost sad. Because I designed that security structure. Daniel stared at her. What? Emily nodded faintly. 6 years ago, Hayes Global licensed one of my forensic accounting algorithms after the Harrison collapse. Alexander felt the floor disappear beneath him for half a second. Wait, he said slowly. The Sentinel Predictive Audit System? Emily looked away toward the city lights. You renamed it after acquisition. Daniel looked stunned. That system made this company billions. Emily did not answer. She only rubbed her hands slowly across the curve of her stomach like she was trying to calm herself from the inside out. Alexander suddenly remembered something then. 6 years ago. A blind acquisition deal finalized through a third-party consulting firm after Harrison Financial collapsed. The original creator had refused publicity. Nobody inside Hayes Global had ever even met the developer. Until now. Vanessa recovered quickly. Too quickly. Even if that were true, she said sharply, none of this proves criminal intent. Emily looked directly at her again. No, she replied quietly. But your deleted access logs do. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced down and immediately turned pale. Alex, he whispered carefully. The backup servers just activated an automatic archive recovery. Vanessa's face lost color for the very first time. Emily saw it happen instantly. So did Alexander. And suddenly the billionaire CEO realized something terrifying. The woman everyone ignored in his lobby was not guessing anymore. She already knew exactly who destroyed his company. Then the lights across the accounting floor flickered once, and a new message appeared on every financial monitor inside Hayes Global Tower at exactly the same moment. Recovered files detected. User access, Vanessa Blake. The message glowing across every monitor inside Hayes Global Tower changed the atmosphere instantly. Recovered files detected. User access, Vanessa Blake. Employees upstairs stopped talking. Analysts froze mid-sentence. Somewhere on the trading floor, a coffee mug slipped from someone's hand and shattered across polished tile. Vanessa Blake stared at the giant financial screen without blinking. Then slowly, carefully, she smiled. And somehow that was worse. You really think a recovered server log proves anything? She asked calmly. Alexander. Hayes did not answer immediately. Because for the first time all night, he realized he no longer knew who inside his own company he could trust. Emily Carter stood quietly near the reception desk, exhaustion pulling at her face now like gravity itself. Her breathing had become slower, heavier. But her eyes stayed sharp. Watching everything. Calculating everything. The logs alone are not enough, Emily said softly. But they lead to the real evidence. Daniel Brooks looked toward her immediately. What evidence? Emily shifted her weight carefully before answering. The acquisition archive from 6 months ago. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly. That archive was destroyed during the server migration. Emily shook her head once. No, she replied. It was mirrored automatically through Sentinel backup routing. Alexander looked at her sharply. You built a hidden backup layer? Emily nodded faintly. I built a system that assumes powerful people will eventually try to erase their mistakes. Silence spread again. Rain continued sliding down the giant windows overlooking Manhattan while sirens echoed faintly somewhere far below in the city streets. Midnight had passed almost an hour ago. In less than 7 hours, the stock market would open. And Hayes Global was balancing on the edge of collapse. Vanessa stepped forward suddenly, her voice sharper now. Alex, this is insane. We are trusting someone who vanished after a corporate scandal and walked into this building homeless. Emily lowered her eyes briefly. Not vanished, she said quietly. Buried. Something about the way she said it made Alexander's chest tighten unexpectedly. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just true. Daniel's tablet buzzed again with another server update. The archive recovery is working, he whispered. We are pulling deleted transaction records now. Vanessa turned pale for only a second before recovering again. Then let legal review them first. Emily immediately shook her head. If legal touches the files before federal auditors see them, the timestamps can be challenged. Alexander looked at her carefully. You already know what is inside those records, do not you? Emily hesitated. Then she gave the smallest nod. I know because I have seen this exact structure before. Alexander frowned. At Harrison Financial? Emily looked toward the glowing city outside the glass walls. No, she said softly. At my husband's company. The sentence landed quietly, but it changed everything. Daniel looked stunned. Even Vanessa blinked. Emily pressed one hand protectively against her stomach again while speaking. 5 years ago, my husband used shell licensing agreements to hide fraudulent transfers during a merger investigation. Her voice stayed calm, but there was something hollow underneath it now. Old pain. When I reported it, the executives protected him. The investigation disappeared. My career disappeared with it. Alexander stared at her. Your husband did this to you? Emily gave a faint bitter smile. My husband taught me something important. She slowly lifted her eyes toward the financial screens glowing red above the lobby. People do not destroy companies all at once. They hollow them out quietly while everyone keeps applauding the stock price. Upstairs, another emergency notification suddenly echoed through the tower speakers. Federal regulatory access request detected. Every face in the lobby changed instantly. Daniel looked at Alexander with alarm. The Securities and Exchange Commission is already trying to enter the servers. Vanessa stepped back slowly. Too slowly. Emily noticed first. So did Alexander. Because guilty people always moved differently once the truth arrived. Then Emily's hand suddenly gripped the edge of the reception desk hard enough for her knuckles to turn white. A sharp breath escaped her lips before she could stop it. Alexander moved toward her instinctively. Emily? She closed her eyes briefly, breathing carefully now. The baby is fine, she whispered. But we are running out of time. The entire tower shifted into survival mode after the federal access alert appeared across the system. Employees rushed through hallways carrying tablets and printed reports while emergency conference calls echoed from glass offices above the lobby. Hayes Global no longer felt like a luxury headquarters. It felt like a sinking ship trying to hide the water rising beneath the floorboards. Emily Carter sat carefully on the leather bench near reception now, one hand resting against her stomach, while Daniel Brooks handed her a bottle of water with shaking fingers. She thanked him softly before looking back toward the giant financial monitors overhead. The numbers were still bleeding. Slower now, but bleeding. Alexander Hayes stood near the elevator staring at the recovered server logs appearing line by line across Daniel's tablet. Timestamp after timestamp linked directly to Vanessa Blake's executive credentials. Deleted audit notices. Hidden transfer approvals. Altered acquisition records. Enough to destroy careers. Enough to trigger prison sentences. But somehow Vanessa still looked composed. Too composed. "You are making a catastrophic mistake," she said coldly. "If this scandal becomes public before market open, investors will destroy this company." Emily slowly lifted her eyes toward her. "The company was already being destroyed," she replied quietly. "You just expected nobody to notice until after you disappeared with the money." Vanessa's jaw tightened. Alexander finally turned toward her fully. "How much?" he asked. Vanessa gave a small disbelieving laugh. "You actually believe her?" Alexander's voice became very calm then. Dangerous calm. "How much?" For the first time all night, Vanessa did not answer immediately. Emily did. 1.4 billion moved offshore," she said softly. "Another 600 million hidden through false acquisition losses." Daniel stared at the screen in horror. "That is almost $2 billion. Emily nodded faintly. "And if the stock crashed tomorrow morning, the theft would look like market collapse instead of fraud." Silence spread again. Somewhere high above them, thunder rolled across Manhattan. Alexander felt physically sick realizing how close Hayes Global had come to complete destruction. Thousands of employees. Retirement funds. Families. Entire careers. All quietly sacrificed for greed hidden behind spreadsheets. Then Emily suddenly leaned forward slightly, her breathing catching again. Alexander crossed the lobby almost instantly. "You need a doctor," he said. Emily shook her head immediately. "No hospitals." "Emily, no," she repeated softly, but there was fear behind it this time. Real fear. She lowered her eyes toward the marble floor. "I still owe medical bills from the last emergency visit." That sentence hit Alexander harder than any financial number that night. For 1 second, the billionaire businessman standing inside a building worth billions of dollars looked at a pregnant woman afraid of hospital debt in America. And something inside him shifted quietly. Daniel's tablet buzzed again. "Alex," he said carefully, "the Securities and Exchange Commission wants immediate remote access to the servers." Vanessa straightened instantly. "Do not give it to them yet." Emily looked toward Alexander. "If you delay now, they will assume you are protecting the fraud." Alexander studied her face carefully. Rainwater still clung to strands of her blonde hair. Her coat sleeves were frayed. Her eyes looked exhausted enough to collapse at any moment. Yet somehow she was still the calmest person in the building. "What would you do?" he asked quietly. Emily answered without hesitation. "Tell the truth before someone else tells it for you." The lobby fell silent after that sentence. Alexander looked toward the glowing skyline outside the tower windows. Then toward the red financial numbers still flashing overhead. Then back toward Emily Carter. A woman the world discarded. A woman his own company ignored. A woman currently saving everything he built. Finally, he nodded once toward Daniel. "Grant the regulators full access." Vanessa's face lost all color. "Alex, if you do this, if I do not," Alexander interrupted coldly, "there will not be a company left to save." Upstairs, system doors unlocked automatically for Federal Review access. Thousands of hidden files began transferring in real time. And at that exact moment, Emily suddenly stared at one specific transaction line on the screen above them, and whispered something that made Alexander Hayes go completely still. "Wait," she said softly. "That account number. I know who helped Vanessa move the money. Alexander Hayes stared at Emily Carter as the lobby around them dissolved into controlled chaos. Federal regulators were already entering the Hayes global servers remotely. Emergency legal calls echoed through the upper floors. News alerts flashed across television screens mounted behind reception. Yet somehow, the most dangerous sentence spoken that night came from the exhausted pregnant woman sitting quietly beneath the giant marble logo of the company she had just saved. I know who helped Vanessa move the money. Daniel Brooks looked up instantly. Who? Emily kept staring at the transaction number glowing on the financial monitor overhead. Her face had gone pale in a different way now. Not exhaustion. Recognition. That routing structure belongs to Mercer Capital Partners, she whispered. Vanessa's expression changed immediately. Tiny. But enough. Alexander saw it. Emily slowly closed her eyes for 1 second before speaking again. My husband works there. Silence crashed through the lobby harder than thunder outside. Daniel blinked in disbelief. Your husband helped move the money? Emily gave the smallest nod. Ex-husband, she corrected softly. Alexander felt something cold settle into his chest. Suddenly every piece connected together. Harrison Financial. The destroyed career. The vanished whistleblower. The homeless shelters. The fear of hospitals. This woman had not lost her life because she failed. She lost it because she told the truth about powerful people. Upstairs, another emergency notification appeared across the accounting systems. Live regulatory review initiated. Vanessa took a slow step backward toward the elevators. This is turning into paranoia, she said sharply. You cannot connect me to someone's failed marriage. Emily looked directly at her. Calm again. Too calm. No, she replied quietly. But the transfer signatures can. Daniel's fingers moved rapidly across the tablet screen. Seconds later his face drained of color. Alex, he whispered. Mercer Capital did authorize the offshore licensing chain. Alexander's jaw tightened hard enough to hurt. Vanessa glanced toward the revolving glass doors behind her. Emily noticed instantly. She is trying to leave before federal investigators arrive, she said softly. 2 security officers immediately stepped toward the exits. Vanessa stopped walking. For the first time all night, her polished corporate mask cracked completely. Do you think exposing me fixes anything? She snapped. This company was already collapsing before I touched it. Alexander's voice turned ice cold. You stole from your own employees. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Your investors expected impossible growth every quarter. I just gave them the illusion they paid for. Emily lowered her eyes briefly. And people lost their lives for that illusion. The lobby became silent again. Somewhere far above them, printers continued spitting out federal audit reports 1 page at a time. Emily slowly stood from the leather bench despite the pain crossing her face. Alexander moved instinctively to steady her arm, but she gently pulled away after regaining balance. Not rude. Just careful. Like someone no longer used to relying on anybody. Daniel looked toward Emily with disbelief still lingering in his voice. How did you figure this out so fast? Emily stared at the glowing financial reports overhead. Because fraud always leaves emotional fingerprints, she said quietly. Greedy people repeat themselves. Alexander watched her carefully then. Rain light reflected across the marble floor around her worn sneakers while billion-dollar executives stood frozen nearby waiting for her next sentence. And suddenly he realized something almost impossible to admit. The smartest person inside Hayes Global had walked through the front doors carrying a backpack and asking for hot water. Emily's breathing tightened again suddenly. One hand pressed harder against her stomach this time. Alexander stepped closer immediately. Emily? She inhaled carefully before forcing a faint smile. Still fine, she whispered. But Daniel was already staring at her with concern. You have been under stress for hours. Emily looked toward the giant windows where early hints of dawn were beginning to soften the black Manhattan skyline. We do not have hours left, she said quietly. Then every phone inside the lobby vibrated at the exact same moment with a breaking news alert. Hayes global fraud investigation leaks to Wall Street before market open. Dawn arrived over Manhattan like a warning. Pale gray light spread across the glass towers outside Hayes Global, while financial news channels exploded with breaking headlines. Fraud investigation inside billion-dollar company. Executives under federal review. Investors panic hours before market open. Employees gathered silently around televisions across the building, watching reporters speculate whether the company would survive the morning. Inside the lobby, nobody was speaking anymore. The truth had become too large to control. Vanessa Blake stood near the elevator surrounded by security, while federal investigators connected remotely to the company's servers upstairs. Her expensive blazer looked strangely small now. Like power itself had started shrinking around her. Alexander Hayes barely looked at her anymore. His attention stayed fixed on Emily Carter. She stood near the reception desk holding herself steady with visible effort, while the city slowly brightened behind her through the rain-covered windows. Exhaustion covered every movement now, but somehow she still looked calmer than everyone else in the building. Daniel Brooks lowered his tablet slowly. "The regulators confirmed the transfers," he said quietly. "The stolen funds are traceable." Vanessa closed her eyes for 1 second. Then years of corporate confidence finally disappeared from her face. Not dramatic. Just empty. Security escorted her quietly toward a private conference room upstairs while reporters outside the building began gathering behind police barriers. Flashing cameras reflected across the marble lobby floor like tiny explosions of light. Emily watched none of it. Instead, she stared at the stock ticker crawling across the television overhead. Hayes Global shares had stopped falling. Slowly. Carefully. The market was stabilizing. Alexander stepped beside her. "You saved the company," he said quietly. Emily gave the faintest shake of her head. "No," she whispered. "I only stopped people from destroying it completely." Her voice sounded weaker now. Daniel noticed immediately. "You need rest," he said gently. Emily looked embarrassed for the first time all night. "I still have nowhere to go," she admitted softly. The sentence hit Alexander harder than he expected. This woman had just saved thousands of jobs, exposed nearly $2 billion in fraud, and protected his company from total collapse. Yet she was still worried about where she would sleep. Alexander looked toward the giant Hayes Global logo hanging above the lobby entrance. For years he believed success meant building something untouchable. Tonight a homeless pregnant woman taught him how fragile everything really was. He turned back toward Emily carefully. "You designed the system that saved this company years before I even knew your name," he said. Emily looked down quietly. "And nobody remembered the woman who built it." The honesty in her voice made the silence afterward feel enormous. Outside, morning traffic slowly filled the wet New York streets while reporters shouted questions behind barricades. Somewhere above them, employees inside Hayes Global were beginning to realize they still had jobs because one forgotten woman walked into the building at the exact right moment. Daniel's phone buzzed one final time. He read the message slowly before looking up with disbelief. "Alex," he said carefully. "The market just opened early for pre-trading reaction." Alexander frowned. "And?" Daniel stared at the numbers on his screen. "The stock is recovering." A stunned silence spread through the lobby again. Emily closed her eyes briefly like she had finally reached the edge of her strength. Alexander instinctively reached out as she swayed slightly from exhaustion. This time, she did not pull away. Rain continued sliding softly down the giant windows while morning light filled the marble lobby for the first time that day. And standing there beside the woman everyone else ignored only hours earlier, Alexander Hayes quietly understood something money had never taught him. Some people lose everything simply because they told the truth before the world was ready to hear it.